There is a moment unmistakable, undeniable, when those who sought to break you realize they never understood you at all. They did not foresee the weight of your silence, the fire beneath your restraint, the clarity hidden beneath the chaos they tried to create. To them, you were only a source, a mirror, a means. But the day came when the mirror cracked, and what they saw looking back terrified them. Narcissists do not fall in love with people, they fall in love with illusions. They don't seek connection, they seek possession. And when they lose the illusion, they lose control. But when you broke free, when you stopped explaining, justifying, defending, something in their world began to collapse. Not because you cursed them, but because you blessed yourself. The narcissist knows now, knows that your worth was never in what they could take, but in what they could never reach. The soul, once awakened, is unshakable. They see you now through different eyes, the eyes of someone who tried to dismantle light and failed. The one they once underestimated has become the one they now fear, not out of vengeance, but out of the unyielding peace you now carry. You were their supply, yes, but more than that, you were their mirror. You reflected what they wanted the world to believe about themselves. But the moment you turned away, the illusion shattered. You were never fragile. You were never weak. You were simply restrained, patient, quiet in your observation. That quiet is what they mistook for submission. That patience for ignorance, that love for dependence. Now the truth rises, not in rage, but in radiance. It rises in your refusal to beg, to plead, to stay small for the comfort of their delusions. It rises in your boundaries, in your absence, in the fact that you no longer respond to their provocations because you no longer recognize their voice as truth. You have outgrown the performance. You have outlasted the chaos, and they know. They know who you are now. Not a source, not a prop, not a pawn, but a person who carries something real. Something eternal. Something they cannot touch without being scorched by it. The world they built on lies, charm, and borrowed strength is caving in because the one thing they needed to keep it standing, your silence, is gone. Your discernment speaks louder than their manipulation, your freedom louder than their facade. Their lives are crumbling not because you cursed them, but because you stepped away. You unplugged. You stopped feeding the very illusion that sustained them. That collapse is not your vengeance, it is the natural death of something that was never rooted in truth. When you walk in integrity, the counterfeit cannot keep its shape. When you shine with the humility of someone healed, the proud become undone by their own undoing. You see, the narcissist never anticipated the cost of your awakening. They thought their game would last forever, but eternity was never on their side. Now they scramble not for you, but for the power they lost when you chose to remember your worth. That remembrance broke the spell, and without your consent, they are powerless. And so their castles fall, not by fire, not by war, but by neglect. The neglect of truth, the neglect of love, the neglect of the very humanity they tried to extract from you but never possessed themselves. They are left with the echo of what could have been a relationship, a friendship, a union, and they cannot rebuild it because what they destroyed was sacred. Not everyone can handle what you carry. Not everyone is meant to stay, and not everyone will survive the revelation of who you really are. But this isn't about them anymore. It never was. Evil is not always dressed in horns and shadows. Often it cloaks itself in charm, intelligence, and even a counterfeit version of light. It walks unnoticed, mimicking the cadence of goodness, performing just enough empathy to pass among the unsuspecting. But the one thing evil cannot truly imitate is purity, because purity cannot be learned, only lived. It is not a role that can be rehearsed. It is a presence that exposes the falseness in all pretense. And so when evil encounters true goodness, it does not recognize it. Not at first. It sees a challenge, a prize to conquer, a soul to manipulate. It sees innocence as weakness, kindness as ignorance, and long-suffering as something it can exploit. But it does not see what lies underneath truth, discernment, fire. Evil is drawn to light the way a moth is drawn to a flame. It approaches with arrogance, believing it can outwit what it does not understand. It mistakes humility for naivety, mercy for permission, and patience for permission. It dances close, confident that it will extract what it wants, and for a time, it may even appear to succeed. It feeds on access, it consumes attention, it plays the long game of deception. But its downfall is always the same. It underestimates the soul that is rooted in truth. It assumes that because it cannot feel guilt, the other cannot feel clarity. It presumes that because it plays God in its own mind, no higher authority watches. But goodness is not passive, it is not helpless. It may not retaliate with weapons or outbursts, but it responds with something far more devastating to evil authenticity. True goodness is not the absence of strength. It is strength under control. It is fire behind glass. It is the kind of purity that blinds those who have lived too long in the dark. When evil draws near to such goodness, it is not embraced, it is exposed. Its schemes begin to unravel. Its words lose their hold. Its presence, once intoxicating, becomes pathetic in the light of what is real. And in that moment, evil begins to feel the burn, not of judgment from the outside, but of exposure from within. The narcissist, the manipulator, the deceiver, each plays a long con that only lasts as long as it goes unrecognized. But when they step into the orbit of a soul that has suffered and stayed kind, been broken and stayed soft, been used and still refused to hate, they enter holy ground. And they do not know it, not at first. They believe they are still the master of the game. They move their pieces with confidence, weaving their narratives with smug precision. But every encounter with the truly good begins to dismantle their illusion, not with loud resistance, but with quiet resilience, not with revenge, but with revelation. Goodness burns evil not with fire, but with contrast, with what it is not. The narcissist spins lies, but goodness is truth without trying. The manipulator distorts, but goodness clarifies simply by being. And the more evil tries to twist, the more it is confronted with its inability to create anything lasting, anything whole, anything true. It is in this collision that the blindness begins to lift. Evil begins to realize that the one it tried to dim is not flickering, but blazing. The one it tried to break is still standing, not bitter, but refined. It is here that evil begins to recoil, but it is too late. It has come too close. It has touched something sacred. It has violated something it did not understand. And now it feels the consequence not as punishment imposed, but as reality revealed. Because the one thing evil cannot survive is being seen for what it truly is. The masks no longer work. The charm no longer lands, the performance no longer convinces. It is no longer the predator, it is the exposed fraud. And the soul it tried to dismantle has become the mirror it cannot bear to look into. Evil does not know it has touched fire until it is already burning. It does not recognize the divine until it is too late to manipulate it. It does not see the weight of goodness until its own emptiness is undeniable. It is not wisdom that protects the good from evil. It is love, enduring and unyielding. A love that holds its own, that walks away without needing to destroy, that waits for vindication without bitterness. This is the fire that consumes not with rage, but with righteousness. This is the light that evil cannot counterfeit, cannot comprehend, and ultimately cannot withstand. There are thrones built by flattery, by fear, and by force constructed not on truth, but on control. These are the false thrones of the narcissist, the deceiver, the pretender. They elevate themselves with borrowed crowns, assuming the posture of kings while possessing none of the character of one. These thrones are not earned but demanded. Not supported by integrity, but propped up by illusion. And for a time they appear solid. For a season they command obedience, elicit admiration, and surround themselves with the applause of those too weary or too wounded to see clearly. But the nature of a false throne is this: it cannot bear the weight of what is real. True authority does not shout, posture, or manipulate. It does not parade its strength or impose its will. True authority simply is. It moves with quiet confidence. It speaks without needing to raise its voice. It leads not through intimidation, but through conviction. And when true authority enters the room, false power trembles. It may not show it, but it senses the shift, because true authority exposes what is borrowed. It makes obvious what is hollow. And the one who sits on a stolen throne begins to feel the weight they were never built to carry. The narcissist rules through illusion. They craft an image, a role, a narrative. They inflate themselves by diminishing others. They rely on the weakness of those around them to maintain the myth of their superiority. They rewrite history. They twist facts. They demand loyalty not through love, but through fear. But beneath all their grandeur lies one truth they cannot escape. They are not the source of anything they claim to own. Not the wisdom, not the peace, not the love, not the light. They are parasites of authenticity. And parasites cannot thrive in the presence of what is whole. The moment you stop bowing to a false throne, its legs begin to shake. The moment you reclaim your dignity, your voice, your identity, the weight shifts. No longer supported by your compliance, the structure starts to splinter. And it is not your vengeance that makes it fall, but your freedom. Because you were the scaffolding. You were the credibility. You were the one who gave weight to their position. When you walk away, they are left with nothing but a costume and a crumbling seat. False authority thrives only in the absence of truth. It hides in manipulation, cloaks itself in charisma, survives by confusing the people it seeks to dominate. But truth arrives like a sunrise, without permission, without apology, and without force. And in the presence of that light lies collapse under their own contradictions. False thrones begin to buckle under the weight of what they can no longer deny. They promised peace, but sowed division. They offered leadership, but fostered chaos. They claimed loyalty, but punished love. And now the fruit of their reign betrays them. The soul that walks in true authority carries no need for a throne. It leads from within. It governs its choices with wisdom, not ego. It rests in the knowledge that real power does not depend on recognition, it depends on righteousness. And when such a soul confronts the counterfeit, it does not need to fight. Its very presence judges. Its stillness unnerves. Its refusal to engage in petty games reveals just how childish the pretender always was. False thrones collapse not in a dramatic blaze, but in quiet exposure. They are not overthrown by force, but by the consistent, immovable presence of truth. The narcissist begins to feel it in the silence that follows your absence, in the clarity of your no. In the peace that blooms in your distance, they sense that the throne they once ruled from was never real, that it was sustained not by strength, but by someone else's belief in the illusion. And now that belief is gone. That faith is withdrawn. That spell is broken. True authority is rooted in service, not domination. It is sacrificial, not self-centered. It knows when to speak and when to be silent. It knows how to lift others without losing itself. And it knows that power is not proven by control, but by restraint. When the truly authoritative rise, they don't need to destroy their enemies, they simply outlast them. The false crumble under the weight of their own lies, their own pride, their own hollow crown. They fall not because they are attacked, but because they were never standing on solid ground to begin with. There is a kind of vision not granted by the eyes, but by the soul, an inward clarity that sees through facade, pierces through noise, and discerns the true from the false without explanation. It is not learned through study, nor sharpened through intellect. It comes through suffering, refinement, prayer, and proximity to truth. Those who possess spiritual sight do not simply see what is visible, they perceive what is hidden. They recognize deception dressed as charm, emptiness masked as power, and motives cloaked in smiles. And this kind of sight, quiet, unannounced, and unwavering, is a threat to those who have built their worlds on shadows. The spiritually blind do not fear loud religion, public rituals, or external devotion. What unsettles them is not how many scriptures someone can quote or how many spiritual words they can use. It is the presence of one who actually sees. Because when you truly see, you cannot be seduced by appearance. You are not swayed by titles nor impressed by platforms. You are no longer controlled by emotional games, guilt-driven performances, or the illusion of authority. You see beyond the words to the spirit they carry, and those who operate in darkness feel it the moment you look at them. Your gaze unsettles them not because you've said anything, but because your presence bears witness. It testifies silently. It holds up a mirror they cannot bear to face. You walk into rooms and unsettle structures built on manipulation, dishonesty, and control, not because you accuse, but because you are awake. The spiritually blind often prefer the company of the compliant. They seek the easily influenced, the distracted, the eager to please. But when they encounter someone with spiritual discernment, someone who no longer plays the game, they are exposed. Their strategies stop working, their charm loses its pull, their dominance loses its effect. Spiritual sight terrifies them because it cannot be bought, borrowed, or bribed. It is not fooled by titles or degrees. It does not mistake loudness for leadership or performance for presence. And once you have it, you cannot unsee. Once your eyes have adjusted to the light of truth, you cannot go back to the comfort of lies. You see through the flattery. You feel the dissonance in conversations. You pick up on what isn't said more than what is. And though you may remain silent, your silence speaks louder than their rehearsed declarations. The spiritually blind are not always without religion. In fact, many hold positions of spiritual authority. But the blind leading the blind is no new tale. The spiritually blind often occupy spaces of influence not because they are qualified, but because they know how to perform. They preach what they do not live. They demand what they will not give. And when you show up fully aware, deeply rooted, and utterly free, they feel it. They may not know how to name it, but they know they are no longer in control. And that is what terrifies them: control. That invisible leash they use to manipulate through shame, fear, or false obligation begins to unravel when spiritual sight enters the picture. The one who once submitted begins to rise. The one who once nodded now questions. The one who once followed blindly now discerns. And the spiritually blind, whose kingdom was built on keeping others in the dark, sense the threat. They will accuse you of pride, call your clarity rebellion, label your freedom as disloyalty. But beneath the accusations is fear, not of you, but of what your sight reveals about them. Your awakening has disrupted their illusion. Your insight has become dangerous not because you speak destruction, but because you walk in truth. And truth does not beg to be believed. It simply stands. It does not defend itself with noise. It confronts with stillness. And that stillness, that calm refusal to participate in falsehood, becomes unbearable to those who need darkness to maintain control. They will try to draw you back in, to provoke you, to confuse you. But once you see, you cannot unsee. Spiritual sight is not superiority. It is responsibility. It is costly. It often isolates before it liberates. But those who see must continue to see. For the world is full of voices, full of a noise, full of performers and illusions. And what it desperately needs are not more followers, but those who have eyes to see and the courage to walk in what they see without apology. There comes a moment in every soul's journey when the echoes of manipulation grow quiet and the voice of identity rises with unshakable clarity. It is not always dramatic, but it is always defining. It is the turning point where the soul says no more. No more bending in the name of peace that only serves the powerful. No more silencing its own needs to accommodate the fragile egos of others. No more giving, and giving only to be left empty, used, and forgotten. This refusal is not bitterness, it is awakening. It is the sacred moment when a soul chooses wholeness over validation, truth over appeasement, and freedom over false belonging. To refuse to be used is to reclaim divine dignity. It is to step away from the systems and relationships that have thrived on your silence. You no longer make yourself small to soothe someone else's pride. You no longer tolerate double standards, emotional debt, or conditional love. You begin to recognize that your worth does not depend on how much you can endure for others, but how deeply you can honor the sacredness of your being. And from that realization flows a new kind of strength, not loud or arrogant, but unyielding. Those who have spent their lives using others, controlling them with charm, guilt, obligation, or fear are unnerved by this kind of soul. They do not know what to do with someone who will no longer play the role. They accuse you of being difficult, selfish, disloyal, but those accusations come from desperation, not truth. Because when someone has always seen you as a resource, your resistance feels like rebellion. You are no longer their supply, their cushion, their emotional dumping ground. You are no longer available for their games. And to them, that is terrifying. The soul that refuses to be used begins to move differently. It walks in rooms without needing to be liked. It listens without absorbing the poison of projection. It speaks with clarity, not for the sake of control, but for the preservation of truth. It loves without losing itself and gives without being drained. It becomes untouchable not because it is hard, but because it is healed. Not because it is isolated, but because it is aligned. And those still clinging to their manipulative scaffolding sense that they can no longer reach you. You begin to choose rest over running, silence over explaining, peace over proving. You realize you don't have to justify your boundaries to those who never honored them to begin with. You stop defending your intuition to people who only understand control. You start walking away not to punish, but to protect. And as you do, you discover that the freedom on the other side of no is the most sacred territory you've ever entered. To be unstoppable is not to dominate, is not to become what once harmed you. It is to be rooted so deeply in who you are that no manipulation can move you. It is to love boldly, give freely, serve humbly, but all from a place of choice, not compulsion. It is to stand firm when others try to redefine you. It is to keep your peace when chaos demands a reaction. It is to live with open hands, yet with discernment, knowing that not everyone deserves access to your soul. And as your soul grows in this clarity, you begin to draw different people. You no longer attract those who feed on your weakness, but those who respect your strength. You find community, not codependency. You find connection, not control. And you learn that your purpose was never to be useful to the wrong people. It was to be powerful in the right hands, under the right purpose, in alignment with truth. You become unstoppable not by force, but by faithfulness to your calling, to your worth, to your design. The world may not understand it. Those who once benefited from your compliance may resist it. But your soul knows, it knows that it was never made to be a tool in someone else's agenda. It was made to shine, to speak, to heal, to grow. And in the moment you choose not to be used, you begin to rise, not as a servant of others' opinions, but as a steward of your own sacred life. There is a kind of justice that does not arrive on demand. It does not appear in the courtroom of public opinion, nor is it hurried by the anxious cries of the falsely accused. True vindication, the kind that restores, heals, and reveals, belongs not to those who shout the loudest, but to those who wait in quiet strength. It is not the proud who are ultimately justified, but the patient. For pride demands recognition now. It seeks to defend, retaliate, and be seen as right at all costs. But patience surrenders its case to a higher judge, knowing that time is often the servant of truth, and silence can carry more weight than shouting ever could. The proud grasp for control when their name is tarnished. They campaign to clear their image, to force others to see what they see about themselves, but in their haste they reveal the desperation underneath. Their ego cannot endure misunderstanding, so they attempt to manage perception through performance. The proud cannot endure being underestimated, misjudged, or mocked, so they resort to loud proclamations, proving themselves in public while remaining tormented in private. Yet vindication, the kind that is lasting and true, is not earned through noise, it is revealed through endurance. Patience, on the other hand, is not weakness. It is not the absence of emotion, but the presence of restraint. It is choosing not to answer every accusation, not to fight every battle, not to match every insult with a reply. The patient soul understands that the truth has its own rhythm, and that light will find its way through the cracks of every lie in time. The one who waits is not idle. They are being forged in the fire of misunderstanding. They are becoming stronger through their silence, not smaller. They trust that while others may see the moment, God sees the whole story. And so the patient endure the whispers, the betrayal, the distortion of their motives. They watch the proud rise quickly, gain applause, gather influence, but they do not chase the crowd. They know that appearances are fleeting and that what is built on pride must eventually collapse under the weight of its own deception. They may be overlooked, dismissed, or even humiliated for a season, but they are not undone. For their foundation is deeper than public approval. It is rooted in truth, and truth, though slow, always arrives. The proud operate in urgency. They manipulate outcomes to preserve image. They fear exposure because exposure threatens the illusion they've built. But the patient are not concerned with image, they are concerned with integrity. Their peace is not dependent on who believes them now, but on who knows them in the end. They live with open hands, willing to let go of the need to be understood immediately, because they trust that truth does not require explanation, it only requires endurance. Vindication often comes in ways the proud could never receive. It comes in the fruit of a life that speaks louder than any defense. It comes in the restoration of reputation without the need for revenge. It comes in the slow turning of hearts, the quiet crumbling of false narratives, and the gentle but undeniable light that exposes what was once hidden. It comes not because the patient forced it, but because they refused to compromise themselves in the waiting. The proud want closure on their own terms. They want to see their enemies humiliated, their doubters silenced, their names praised, but the patient find peace even if none of that happens. They are content to let time do its work, to let the truth surface when it's ready. They have no interest in playing the victim or demanding sympathy. They walk forward wounded but not bitter, quiet but not defeated. Their confidence is not in the outcome, but in the one who watches over the outcome. And so, in the end, it is the patient who are vindicated, not just in the eyes of others, but in the peace that no lie can touch. They rise without needing to climb over others. They are restored without needing to retaliate. And their story, once marked by injustice, becomes a testimony of quiet strength. The world may not celebrate them, but heaven does, because it is patience, not pride, that holds the line when everything else falls. It is patience that refuses to lose character for the sake of quick comfort. And it is patience that proves again and again that time will always bow to truth. Light does not argue with the dark. It does not shrink from its presence, nor tremble before its vastness. It does not ask for permission to enter. It does not announce its coming with fanfare or demand acceptance before it acts. Light simply arrives, and when it does, darkness has no choice but to give way. This is the quiet courage of light. It does not need to confront the darkness with force. Its mere presence of confrontation enough. It exposes, reveals, awakens, and restores. It does not posture, it prevails. Darkness thrives on fear, deception, and confusion. It builds its influence in silence and shadows, feeding on what is hidden, what is secret, what is suppressed. It pretends to be endless. It convinces the soul that it has always been and always will be. But the lie of darkness is exposed in the moment light steps in, because even the smallest glimmer causes the night to retreat. A single candle in a cave is enough to remind the soul the dark is temporary. The night may be long, but it is never final. Light has never lost a battle with darkness. It doesn't even have to fight, it only has to be. There are those who carry this kind of light not because they are perfect, but because they have allowed themselves to be lit by truth. These souls walk into rooms and change the atmosphere not through noise or force, but through clarity, peace, and unwavering presence. Their very being convicts the deceptive, unsettles the manipulator, exposes the pretender not because they aim to attack, but because they refuse to dim. What is secret? What is suppressed? It pretends to be endless. It convinces the soul that it has always been and always will be. But the lie of darkness is exposed in the moment light steps in, because even the smallest glimmer causes the night to retreat. A single candle in a cave is enough to remind the soul the dark is temporary. The night may be long, but it is never final. Light has never lost a battle with darkness. It doesn't even have to fight, it only has to be. There are those who carry this kind of light not because they are perfect, but because they have allowed themselves to be lit by truth. These souls walk into rooms and change the atmosphere, not through noise or force, but through clarity, peace, and unwavering presence. Their very being convicts the deceptive, unsettles the manipulator, exposes the pretender not because they aim to attack, but because they refuse to dim. The light does not need to match the energy of the dark to be effective. It does not need to rage to be strong. In fact, its quietness is often its greatest strength. The world teaches that power is loud, aggressive, attention-seeking. But light shows us another way power can be still focused, relentless in its gentleness. It does not waver because of who opposes it. It moves forward not because it's never resisted, but because it knows resistance is only evidence that the darkness is unsettled by its presence. And when light appears, the darkness must reckon with it. Lies are shown for what they are. Fear is unmasked. Manipulation is disarmed, and the soul that had nearly accepted the silence of the night begins to stir. Hope returns, vision clears, paths become visible, not because the dark gave up, but because the light simply arrived. We are not called to fear the dark, but to carry the light. We are not responsible for raising all the darkness in the world, but we are responsible for refusing to let it live in us. And when we dare to walk into dark places, places of pain, confusion, injustice, betrayal, with nothing but the quiet flame of truth within us, something shifts. Not always instantly, not always visibly, but always inevitably. Light is not intimidated because it knows what it carries. It does not need to explain itself to be effective. It does not need validation to be powerful. And those who choose to carry it must do the same. Let the light in you be steady. Let it be pure. Let it be willing to enter the places others fear to go. You do not have to fear the darkness around you. You only have to remember what is within you. Because light does not compete with the dark. It transforms it, not by force, but by simply arriving.